So you've nailed your interview up until now. Everything's going well, the coding went well, some of the questions that they asked you were prepared for, you told your hero stories, everything feels good. Or sometimes things don't work out as expected, and maybe you didn't do that well in your coding questions. Or they asked you a question that you weren't expecting in the non-technical questions. Well, never give up, first of all, because it's very rare that you have a perfect interview. Remember, you're not competing against 100% test score. You're competing against other candidates. Other candidates get asked questions too. There are ways that you can improve those odds and make sure that you still stand out, even if perhaps you didn't ace everything. And here I want to list out some of my, what I call secret weapons. Yes, a bit of a exaggerated name, but I think if you're able to work these into conversations, into questions, I think it will improve your chances of landing that job. Because what I'm about to show you are problems that I've noticed a lot in the workplace when it comes to programmers. There are a ton of really great programmers, but amongst them, there's always things that are common, that are problematic, perhaps not for us programmers, but for managers, bosses, CEOs. And by avoiding these common pitfalls, you can stand out and show that you're not a typical developer. So let's go over some of them. The first one is simplicity over complexity. It's very easy as a programmer to get into our own heads and complicate things and come up with really interesting solutions to problems that perhaps only we understand, or perhaps that only few smart coders might understand. But remember, code and problem solving is about solving problems for others. And as we know, code has to be maintainable, readable. You want to demonstrate that you're the type of programmer that emphasizes simplicity over complexity. Work that into your conversation. Work how when you worked on a project with team members, you wanted to make sure that the code was readable, that you didn't overcomplicate the problem just to appear smart or clever. Instead, you focused on readable code because you understood that working in a team means making sure that the code is readable and maintainable long after you've written it. This is a great thing to point out in an interview because it's rare for somebody to understand this with only a few years of experience. This is something that a lot of senior developers know, or senior programmers know. The next one is a famous quote that a lot of people must have heard by now. Premature optimization is the root of all evil. We always try to optimize our code, optimize performance, see what we can do better. But you have to work with your limited time. That is, based on how much time I have now, how many resources I have now. Is making a 1% improvement in performance worth it? If you're able to demonstrate to the interviewer that you're the type of person that understands the value of time and resources and money, and how you're able to work on things that matter, such as performance, which is a big one, without getting too obsessed with it, that's a good thing. And again, something that a lot of senior developers and programmers know. The next one is kind of related. You want to focus on overall goal and not be myopic. Now, what does myopic mean? Myopic means you're just very narrowly focused on one thing. So we get tasked with a problem, and all we care about is solving that problem. And we start to ignore some other things that might be important to the project. For example, a client might have a deadline that needs a product out the door and finished in a week. But you as a programmer focus on really good code, a really good performance. You ignore that request for 1 week and instead focus on really, really good code. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to understand the business consequences of what we do. And when you're working at a company or for yourself or freelancing, you want to look at the overall goal and not just focus on what you think is important. You have to understand what the needs are of the project and work with them. And again, if you're able to demonstrate this and work this into the conversation, such as saying something like, a client requested that we deliver a product before their big conference, I knew that that was a very important thing. So I set up a meeting with my team to make sure that that was our number one priority and that we could always refactor code. And we actually dedicated time after the conference for a week where we refactor our code. But we made sure that the very first thing we did was to make sure that we're able to meet the deadline that the client wants, because the client provides the overall goal of the project. And a happy client means that we're able to continue working with them. Again, showing that you're not a typical developer that just gets given a task and that's all you focus on, that you understand the overall needs of your tasks. This is another very common one. especially amongst programmers like us, where we tend to like to complain about clients, ugly code, maybe coworkers that can get frustrating. First of all, that usually never helps, but it also creates a very toxic environment at the workplace. Nobody wants to work with somebody that complains all the time, that creates this negative energy. And if you're able to talk to your interviewer and how you're the type of person that is comfortable working with clients and that you don't like complaining or being negative about coworkers or bosses, well, that immediately makes you stand out because you're a pleasant person to work with. And that's a hard thing to put into a conversation in an interview, but there are ways of doing it, such as your past experiences where you may have demonstrated these values. And then finally, this is a big one, no ego. When we write code or when we program, when we solve problems, we take pride in our work. And when we submit something like a pull request or somebody checks our code and they make comments to it, we might feel a little bit hurt by these comments because we feel that we're not perfect, that we made mistakes. And a lot of tension can form in workplaces when this happens. It is a big problem for companies. But if you're the type of coder that likes getting feedback, that takes constructive criticism, and understands that there's no ego here, we work as a team, there's no individual, and that the overall goal of the company or project is what matters, and you're able to demonstrate that, that immediately is a big sell, or it makes you a very valuable developer. And if you're able to do these things all over here, that makes you really stand out. I can speak from experiences when hiring developers and working at some big companies that these are really rare. Having a developer that understands these and is comfortable with these points is very, very valuable. And you mostly only see these with senior developers. So this is your secret weapon. If you're able to work these into conversation, it's going to really give you those extra points with the interviewer. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Yeah.